Elijah means Yahweh is my God, and the prophet Elijah came to prominence in a time of great corruption 100 years after King David. Almost 1,000 years later, Jesus said, "Every kingdom divided against itself is brought to desolation, and every house divided against itself will not stand." Over 1,800 years later, President Lincoln quoted Jesus when wringing his hands before the Republican State Convention in Illinois over the issue of slavery. And here we are today, discussing slavery by another name in the 60-year period since the end of the Civil Rights period. The last 60 years has calcified into a new American nadir characterized by over-incarceration, rife with contemporary lynchings, and plagued by summary executions at the hands of police. It's Jim Crow 2.0. Until now, so now, I must speak on Elijah McClain. Elijah was a 23-year-old black man who lived in Aurora, Colorado. He was murdered by Aurora police officers Nathan Woodyard, Jason Rosenblatt, and Randy Rodema. You're hearing about his death now, but he was actually murdered in August of 2019, almost a year ago, walking home from a convenience store wearing a ski mask because he was anemic and having earbuds in his ears so that he couldn't hear the cops at first when they were telling him to stop. The police immediately accosted him and threw him down, claiming he was resisting and that he had incredible crazy strength. That's quotes. Elijah stood 5'6" and weighed 140 pounds, per his autopsy. The three cops were put on administrative leave, and Dave Young, the district attorney in Aurora, upon reading the autopsy, declared that the police had done nothing wrong, despite the fact that Elijah had a heart attack and went on the way to the hospital and fell into a coma shortly after. Elijah's family attorney told ABC News in Denver that whatever the report says, it's clear that if the police had never even put their hands on Elijah, he'd be alive today. The various cops' body cameras mysteriously fell off and onto the ground as they were restraining him. As they did that, he vomited several times and apologized as he did. I had a very blunt and emotional conversation with my family the other night about Elijah. At the outset, I admitted that though I'm not a proponent of cancel culture, the details of which I can save for another share, I've recently unfriended a bunch of people on social media. No question, no feedback, I just unplugged them. My daughter questioned my choice because I'm more often a proponent of dialogue. And I've said repeatedly over these last 4 or 5 years on record that a great conflagration will come if we don't keep talking, if we don't keep dialoguing. She said drawing such a severe line may instead provoke more animosity. It won't help the dialogue. It won't stoke sympathy. It won't stoke self-examination. I adore my daughter who's shooting this piece right now. I appreciate her candidness and her analysis. I really appreciate her compassion. But in light of Elijah and George and Brianna and Ahmaud and countless others, I felt like canceling a few people whose only response to these murders and repeated injustices was a blue live stripe, or their workout video, or their foodie posts, or their all lives matter nonsense. Theirs were arguments without debate. Our beliefs are too far removed, and I take Michelle Alexander's approach, and I don't bother wasting my energy with people so far across the spectrum from me that nothing I say or do, no matter how much I plead, no matter how much I plead for the humanity of black men, women, and children, it's not going to bridge our divide. I felt like removing such provocation from my field of view on social media would be healthier for me. There are people whose messaging is loud and clear out there, and it's anathema to the innate dignity of black lives. In that conversation we were having that night, I told my daughter that everything she was speaking on speaks to her compassion and her willingness to disabuse people of their naivete, their ignorance, or their outright prejudice. I touted as much in the Juneteenth video that we just shot a few weeks ago. However, it's not my job to convert people to open-heartedness. It's my job to simply tell the truth of our shared history, talk about our culture, let them know our humanness, and talk about our deep historical and contemporary sins. I gotta shed light on American hypocrisy. I have to shed light on African American dignity. If people hear Elijah McClain crying out, and if they can hear him apologizing to the cops for killing him, and they have no call to action, if that doesn't come from deep in their hearts, then nothing I'm gonna say or post or argue about is gonna change them anyway. What's most appalling and what really enrages me is that the entire Colorado law enforcement community, they stonewalled the McClain family for a year on top of them losing their son in this horrific, mysterious condition. And then they get no answer for the crime of his death. Imagine being his parents, wondering for 10 months, what the hell happened to my son? I would be out of my goddamn mind if the entire world around me had no answers about the death of my son. They'd have to kill me to keep from answering about killing my son. The DA in Elijah's case keeps saying there's no proof of wrongdoing, and I'm like, besides the young man's dead body? Come on. Even with proof in front of their eyes, so many Americans just refuse to accept that systemic racism is still here today. And it's so hard to maintain composure on the daily when you feel like you and your people are hunted and have no worth on the daily. And then on top of that, I'm asked to articulate my rage in a palatable way, to make my fear and anger relatable. I've tried, but to say it's difficult is an understatement. I will continue to welcome my friends and neighbors coming to me, asking me, what can I do? And I appreciate my friends and family of all colors checking in on my sanity and helping me take my emotional temperature. I'm blessed with those sensitive enough to do so. And I love my friends who are like every day out there on social media, every website, they're disseminating the info, foundations, every new hashtag. They're talking about town halls and they're letting people know where to donate. They're sending out more news, the protests and everything. They're just getting that info out there. I appreciate that so much. The means to help fix what's wrong are at millions of white people's fingertips, as surely as they're at my own. Black people have been saying each one teach one for years. Now white folks can do that and help disabuse themselves of their prejudices. They can go out there and get the info. Keep in mind, black folks aren't here to assuage white guilt. Guilt isn't going to help anyway. Progressive white folks taking action will help. Being assertive will help. Standing up to your bosses and your family members will help. Talking out to corporations will help. Voting out bad laws and lawmakers will help. Donating your tools, talent, and time to the cause, that will all help. Elijah McClain taught himself to play the violin, and he'd play it for kittens and other rescued animals at a local shelter in Aurora. He was small and sensitive and vegan, and he was slammed to the ground by 3 burly armed overseers, modern-day slave catchers with egos and pistols, who attacked a young man coming back from the convenience store with a bottle of tea. On the video of his murder, one cop at some point stops and asks, "Are you okay?" He was asking the other cop who KO'd Elijah with a chokehold. He was not asking about Elijah, who vomited, apologized, passed out, woke up, vomited again. This madness must stop. This movement will persevere. Because we are finally witnessing America's foundation, built on sand, shifting and crumbling under the weight of its own hatred. And we must be ready to rebuild a far better tomorrow what is raised today.